Hello. So, last video dealt with a subject that I think is very underappreciated in looking at and exploring when it comes to a lot of these ideas regarding, law of assumption, law of attraction, manifesting, manifesting, whatever we want to call it. And so, yeah, I mean, I would suggest if you haven't watched the last video where I discuss or quote, various LOA teachers talking about dealing with failure. If you haven't watched that yet, I would watch it. And it's a very interesting subject to compare how these great teachers talk about dealing with failure. And I thought that, that this is something that people would want to discuss. So I'm like, let me check out the comments about what people have to say about this subject. And boy, was I wrong. There was one person who said, like that they needed to hear this. They were very thankful, which is great. I mean, that's why I make these videos, is so people who wouldn't necessarily hear this information or hear it explained in the way we talk about it get to hear it. But there was I literally don't think there was any other comments that were interesting. But there were two really good troll comments. And I thought I'd read them because it's interesting, and I think it explains the scene that pervades the Neville and LOA community. And why, this channel perhaps is not the right avenue for a lot of people into this stuff. I'm trying to put this stuff out there so people just get exposed to it. Meaning these ideas where, we quote Neville, Maxwell Maltz, and W. Clement Stone in one video, right? I don't know many other people who are doing that type of thing. Maybe Joseph Rodriguez does something like that, but I can't think of that many other people talking about these ideas semi-intelligently that are, making these comparisons and contrasts. So, I try to promote my channel in the meager way that I know how to, because I want people to find it. And at the same time, I understand that a lot of people, once they find it, it's not going to be a good fit for them. That's how that stuff works. It's fine. But let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Because again, this isn't about me griping as much as it's about exploring how people respond to this information, and when they hear conflicting viewpoints or different viewpoints on very important subjects like failing and failure in regards to LOA principles. So here's the first one. This is a good one. Oh, that just about does it for me. Why not try and gain an audience based on your own name and work, and not by dissing Neville's, which you don't understand anyway? At least you didn't call his advice crappy this time. Must be a New Year resolution. Unsubscribed. I'll see you later. Bye. People who think that I'm dissing Neville's work, if you really think that, just please unsubscribe, stop watching my videos. In almost all the videos where I'm dissing his work or critically examining his work, I say I love Neville and I've gained so much from his teachings. I love Neville. Neville's the reason that I got into these ideas. And I love Neville. I feel like a lot of these people who feel this way about what I'm saying have they probably never read Relax More, Try Less, or Mindful Manifestation, or Manifestations Relaxation, or looked at some of the books I've edited about Neville stuff. I love Neville. But when people hear criticism of that guy, a lot of people just can't handle it. They can't process it. Because again, they put him on a pedestal. In my opinion, I don't think Neville would have liked that. Neville was a very open-minded person, and very well aware of different traditions and the New Thought movement, and he was just a very curious guy. He would, in his lectures, he always talks about these various things that he's read about, or that interest him. Yeah, and I mean, the reason I try to gain an audience based on his name is because I can talk about his stuff somewhat intelligently, and as I've often mentioned and mentioned the other day, not many people can. And that's not because I'm, this fantastic person. It's just that I have common sense, and I know how to talk about these concepts in a way that actually is relevant and can make it work more easily for you, or for a lot of you. Those are the kind of people that I want my channel to attract. If I'm doing something as silly as YouTube videos, and they are silly, I would say, generally speaking, compared to the books I've written, or most of the podcast episodes I've done. If I'm doing something as silly as YouTube, as social media oriented as YouTube, I'm going to give it what I know about. You know what I mean? And I'm going to try to attract an audience, in a way that will interest them, while providing my own angle on it. So anyway, yeah, see you later, unsubscriber. I hope a lot more of you unsubscribe to this video if you have similar sentiments to that person, because I don't care about subscribers. You think that means shit to me? It doesn't mean anything. I just want people to hear this information, to hear this take, and they get exposed to other takes, because I think too many people who are into Neville have never even heard of Maxwell Maltz, or W. Clement Stone, or Emile Coué. And I think that's a shame. Let's get to the next great troll comment. In the last video, you said all the other channels are just inspiring, blah, 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 and they add no value. What's the value from sitting in front of a camera and reading 34,322 books? Do you apply what you read, or are you just on this endless, I need to read everything before I start journey? Deep comment there. I wonder if this person's ever read any of my books, or genuinely listens with an open mind to, the podcast. And more so, I wonder, why the hell are they watching my videos if they seriously have these questions? I personally, this question that this troll had does bring up something interesting, which is that there are people who really benefit from these LOA ideas just by reading or listening to one teacher, like Neville, right? They just listen to Neville, or they just listen to Abraham Hicks, and that's it. That works for some people. For me, it certainly does not. I have benefited greatly by, eclectically exploring these teachings. When I first got into Neville, it was 2014, and I was very fortunate because, as much as I loved his stuff and how as eye-opening as it was, I was very fortunate to not only find Joseph Murphy and Florence Scovel Shinn, and that was very fortuitous. I mean, that was very helpful to see different perspectives, but basically talking about the same thing. But I was very fortunate to find Richard Dott's books at around the same time. Within, I'd say, 6 months of I discovered Neville, I discovered Richard Dott's teachings. And that was so helpful because Dott's is such a great teacher and writer, and his perspective resonates so deeply with me, yet his approach on paper is seemingly drastically different than Neville's. Drastically different. And, I really like Abraham Hicks, but I resonate more with what Dotz is saying, and Dotz is very Abraham Hicks inspired. And this, again, is like the perceived battle between the law of attraction and the law of assumption. But right away, I was able to see parallels and similarities between like the work of Dotz and Abraham Hicks and people like Neville and Joseph Murphy. There were many more similarities there and helpful pointers that I could apply in my life, by, taking what I liked from those different teachers and melding them together, than just relying on Neville or just relying on Abraham Hicks or just relying on Richard Dotz. For me, applying various teachers is a much more holistic and helpful way for me to have this stuff work in my life. I love that. Are you just on this endless, I need to read everything before I start journey? Do you know my stuff again? Do you know who I am? Have you listened to my podcast? Or read my books? Maybe you have. And if you still think that, then don't watch my videos, for gosh sake. I'm not an academic. I've read these books just to try to get something out of them and apply it directly in my life. And as I said in the Law of Attraction Simplified, most of these teachers, even the great ones, like Neville, like Richard Dotz, like Joseph Murphy, even the great ones, only usually 10% of what they say, 20% max, seems really relevant to me. And that's what I take. That's what I apply. I try to apply more than just that initially, but what I found pretty quickly, within a year or two of starting to try this stuff out, is that even the best teachers, I was really only, working effectively with 20% of what they taught, or less, sometimes 5%. So you can have a teacher who's really good, you think is great, and there's only one or two things they say that make them great for you, and the rest is irrelevant or crap. One thing I do think I'm very good at is parsing through stuff and using the 80-20 rule and just taking what works for me and, pretty much putting all the other stuff on the back burner. But that's very hard to do, especially in this day and age. I got into this stuff where there wasn't as much social media about it. So it was like you find the book and go through it. It was easier to parse through and eliminate what wasn't relevant for you at that time, in like in the 2000 teens than it is now. But I've wasted a lot. I've discussed this. I've wasted a lot of time going through stuff and trying to parse what was valuable to me, and wasting too much time just on stuff that clearly wasn't valuable to me. But nonetheless, I would say one of my strengths is I can find what works for me and then utilize that without worrying about doing all this other stuff that's not relevant. And I've made several videos about this. I'll link to them. There's a couple, so I'll link to them below in the description if you want to see me talking about that. But yeah, the name of the game when it comes to this LOA stuff is applying it. There's no point in just reading about it. You want to read something and immediately experiment with it. You don't want to wait. You got to experiment. This is an experiential process. And what I've found is all these, teachings, like they use this grandiose language a lot of the time, and they make it seem like if you do these things, it's all going to work out beautifully. For me, it's not like that at all. It's like one thing they say works well for me, and often not in the way they explain how it will work well for me. And most things end up not being effective, and so I discard them. But as the years have gone on, because I'm a curious person, even though I'm not academic about any of this stuff, I'm curious and I like reading about interesting things. I've been into this thing for long enough where like I inevitably have explored a lot of different teachers and read a lot of different stuff, But if you look back, at like my podcast, for instance, the teachers that I constantly mention are not that many at all. The three I referenced in the last video are people I reference often. Neville, Maltz, Stone. Those are three big ones for me. And the others that I feel like I often mention are obviously Coué, right? I talk about Coué all the time. He's my favorite. And if you were to take just one LOA teacher, I would say that's the guy to take for the majority of people. Kue, H. Emily Cady. I reference her all the time. I mean, H. Emily Cady is just like, I love H. Emily Cady. I really resonate with her stuff. So I often talk about her because she's been very helpful for me personally in applying these ideas in a better way. Obviously, Joseph Murphy, because his stuff is so practical and helpful, we talk about him all the time. And then, I mean, there's other people that I talk about, some that aren't as relevant to the discussion because they're more like interesting and theoretical, but like I don't necessarily apply their work in the same way. I'm thinking people like Lester Levinston, who we talk about some, David Hawkins, who we talk about some. Levinson and Hawkins are, they work together, but they're important in my opinion. And Richard Dotz is very important to me. So that's actually not that many teachers when when I've been at this for like almost 10 years, those are the teachers I tend to go back to. And a lot of them, like, I won't even look at their stuff for a year and I'll come back to it. The person that I always look at constantly is Kue. That's really it. All these other teachers I go through fluctuations of looking at their stuff and applying their stuff. And I love bringing in new ideas. When I find ideas that are relevant to me, that are working for me, I love to mention them to other people because they're working for me or they're working, for clients I've had. And I like to mention that stuff too. But it's all based on my experiences, I don't do a lot of theory. Like, for instance, like I've never been into journaling, so I don't spend a lot of time ever talking about journaling. I mention it as an option, but like I don't journal, so I don't know anything about that, But there's so many similarities and parallels we can draw, like we did in the failure video of the last video, and I hope people can see that and that we can work together, exploring the differences and take what we want and, recognize it's okay to take some of a teaching and not take all of it and just apply what works for us, for you. That really is the point of the channel. And I think I'm pretty chill about it, how I present stuff. But yeah, I mean, I do feel also as if I have to make it known how much I disagree with how this stuff is usually presented on YouTube. And, I want to be a healthy alternative for people if they don't feel good about how they're hearing this advice about the law of assumption or the law of attraction. If it makes them feel uncomfortable or like they're doing something wrong, I'm here to tell you that you're doing nothing wrong, and that there's many options you can explore that can help you apply this stuff better and to feel better, which is really what it comes down to, is feeling better more often. So I hope that was helpful. And I hope the trolls loved it. And yeah, until next time, enjoy.